Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And today I'm joined here by Corinn with a games we've been playing. This is Corinn from SuperBlondeNerd. Corinn, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you, Mackenzie?
I'm doing great. It's a happy Monday. The summer is dwindling, but I am excited to share all of the awesome games that we've been playing. And this is our games we've been playing, episode 20. So Corinn's been joining me for the last couple episodes. Very excited to have her and excited to share all of these great games. Corinn, anything else before we begin?
Nope. I do apologize that your summer is ending.
It is rough, but that does not mean that the games are ending. As
No.
Corinn and I were talking about earlier, this just means that I have a bunch of new audiences that I get to teach cool new games to. So very excited to get started with all of this awesome new gaming. So Gen Con is over. New stuff is going to be coming out all over the place. Exciting time. So Corinn, why don't you start off our discussion today? What is a game that you've been playing recently?
I have been playing the game I haven't played in a while, but love to come back to, which is Everdell. And
All right.
specifically Everdell with the expansion Spirecrest attached to it. So, first of all, Everdell, I've talked about Everdell in a video on my channel about aesthetically pleasing board games, and Everdell 100% meets all of those requirements. The artwork is enchanting and adorable, and the 3D elements throughout this game, not only building the Ever Tree, but all of the components that you use to build your cards and your tableau. The pebbles and the berries and all of those are so tactile and wonderful. I love them. So if you want to hear a little bit more about me geeking out, it's on my channel. I'm going to plug it because my sister and I talk about Everdell, and then I do talk about it in the aesthetically pleasing game. So, but with Spirecrest, you also get an extended, they add it to the bottom of your initial playmat, and you get to go through a trail as each season passes. And on the way, if you are lucky enough, you will encounter larger creatures that you can use to, they have abilities, and then you can put your character on top of them and move them about on different places on the player mat. There are so many cool creatures. I have had the ability to ride the warthog, which I think is named Truffles. and
Adorable.
and then also Honey Paw, which is the giant, the grizzly bear, I think. There's a wolf, there's a moose, there's a peacock, there's, I know there's a bunch more, but it's just very cool because each of those large creatures have abilities that can help you in certain, either like, I think one of them helps you revisit a spot during the season or take a worker back so you can, again, do another action during your season. It's super awesome, but there are also caveats in each season now with this trail. There is usually some sort of requirement or like kind of disadvantage that you have in each season then as well. Like you can't take cards from the meadow, or that's the main one I can think of at the moment, but there's a lot of different ones that each, as only the person, again, who goes into the next season has to deal with. So if I'm the only one in summer, I deal with that prerequisite while everyone else is still in the spring's requirement. So if they can't take from the meadow, then that's in spring, and then I can't do like an additional action or something. I don't know, like things like that. I feel like I covered most things in Spirecrest. You get to the creatures that you get them. Oh yes, what is that? The expedition costs. So there are, each place that you pass on the trail, you get a specific piece of your map, and you have choices to choose from. And those things at the bottom, those are what you need to have at the end of your game in order to receive those points. So at the end of the game, you want to have 2 twigs and 2 resin, and you will get 5 points, and that will help you go onto the next part of your map, which will then be, if you have 3 more of any resources, you get 3 points. The next part of the map where it looks like you get a card in resin. So lots of additional ways to gain points, and Again, just really cool elements. Again, more beautiful artwork. And again, I love the incorporation of more creatures and like incorporating big creatures, which would actually exist in all the forests and the areas that you would encounter in the beautiful world of Everdell.
I'm totally with you here. I think that this game does a really good job of making the beautiful also functional. I think this expansion is brilliant in the way it balances these super awesome abilities with these restrictions in the form of the weather cards. So we played this actually yesterday. So, and I think it's brilliant. I really think this is the strongest expansion that Everdell has because of the choice, and it puts a lot of interesting choices on the players as to when to pass for season. You alluded to it earlier with the season cards where the weather only affects you if you're in that season. Some may say you can't take the cards in the center, the meadow cards, into your hand. But that means that there is a strategical advantage to passing early to gain access to the cards in the center, while the other people in the back have this other restriction on them. But you also have a negative of having that surprise because you don't know what's going to be negatively affecting you. The choice on the different abilities is really powerful, and they offset the negatives that come from the weather. I love this. I think it's brilliant. I think that this expansion is perfect in what it does. It's really good. This is my favorite way to play Everdell. It doesn't add more cards into the deck, so it doesn't dilute any of the combos that exist, but it adds this additional aspect that's going to change the way that you play. And we played recently where one player had this building. This was Ariana. She had this building where if you visited it, you could go into the discard pile and find cards and fill your hand size up to it. And it was absurd because in the original game, whoever usually gets the cranes and the innkeepers gets a bunch of free stuff. But now, if people are using those, that dig from cards in the discard pile becomes even stronger because you take these recursive cards to give yourselves even more discounts. So even holding on to a crane to prevent it from getting the discard pile is another option that you have to think about. This is so good. It solves a lot of the problems that I have with the original base game, but also just is more fun with the cool, interesting animeeples, the different varied effects, and the combos that can be driven from them all. This is an amazing expansion. I love it.
Yeah. We also, now that I think about it, we also did play with, I think there's like legendary cards that you can add. So we had that with like the Queen and the King, like just certain cards that basically replace or upgrade certain cards. So like you have the Inn, and then they've upgraded it to like the Green Acorn Inn, something like that. And so there's an ability with that Inn more than probably to the benefit of it being a little bit better, a little bit more upgraded.
That's interesting. What do you think about that expansion in general?
So we've only used it once. I got the Inn, and I thought that was a nice upgrade. This was something that we were discussing of like you can't have like two queens. It's just like the one or the other. You know, that kind of addition. From what I had, I don't really have like it's super awesome, but I also don't think it's like negative either. I don't know if it's like, oh, like you have to have them. I enjoy it because there is new artwork and like things to add to kind of the lore in the world of Everdell. But I personally don't know if all of the cards are like super enhance the game. I do enjoy that all of these cards have like specific names. So again, just adding to the lore and the world of Everdell. Yeah, but I had the Queen which was very cool. You can achieve an event even if you don't meet the requirements. So that's cool if you get her pretty early. I would see how that was like. I almost didn't luck out with that. I got the last event that wasn't taken because it took me so long to like play her because she's worth 6 berries. She's expensive. So maybe that I understand the expense because if it's like a legendary card, it's going to cost more. But also, her use was almost null and void because it was so close to the end of the season. That could have been just my gameplay, but also.
So this expansion to me is actually, I think, the weakest out of all the expansions next to the Rugwort one, the big take that one. This one is, let's just take a look at two of these cards. You have the Historian Foresight here. He takes the place of the Historian, and the Historian in the base game is really good. Every time you play a card, you get to draw a card. Awesome. Yes. But this character says every time you play a critter, you draw 2 cards, and every time you play construction, you get a resource of your choice. Right off the bat, that's insane. Like, if you get this early, you are going to be steamrolling this game, basically playing whatever you want. And let's compare it to Cirrus Windfall here. 4 berries for an instant effect. You may play a card from your hand up to 3 points for free. One-time effect, pretty negligible on the effect. You
Yeah.
discard the hand size. And when we played this a couple of times and just found that the cards here are just severely underbalanced. It is pretty crushing to get something like this. And even if you get like that innkeeper card where you can pay something for 3 berries less, if you get that into the queen here, pretty nuts. Into the historian in particular, you pretty much steamrolled the game. We found that since these are one of cards and they don't take up a space in your city, they're cards that we just don't play with. It's whoever gets the best one tends to be the winner. And it's a little unfortunate. So not a big fan of this expansion in particular, but I do love the artwork on here. I love the idea of the legends. I'd love to see them figure out a way to make them more fun, honestly. It's a little bit frustrating when the person next to you has some of this like recurring crazy effect, and then you have like a one-time effect that's pretty negligible and you can't do much about it because that was the one you're dealt with. They are nice because they don't take up spots in your hand or spots in your cities, so they're always an option, particularly if you have like this the end game scoring one. I think that's pretty cool. You have a strategy that you can build for that no one can really mess with, and I like that. But I do think that the inherent advantage of some of these outweighs it a little bit too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Is that literally the only cards that come in it?
I think those are the critters that come in it, and then you also
the
locations. Okay. So I think everybody gets one of the critters and one of the locations, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I kind of wish there were more. That way, maybe they balance, even if they did have some OP cards versus like the negligible could feel a little bit more balanced. So not everyone's like completely screwed or rickrolled the whole entire the entire game.
I totally agree with you. Alternatively, I think I forget what it's called. It's the small card set that comes with like just a bunch more critters and locations. I think that one is really good. It's got a bunch of gambling, so it's up to the players on their push their luck they want to play with, and I think that's quite a bit of fun. So I do like that one. It adds cards that are not incredibly overpowered, and the fact that they fit in nicely with the original set works really well in my opinion. But overall, I think Everdell is an excellent pick, and I think that I'm so happy you got to play Spirecrest. I really like that expansion.
Yes. Me too.
Anything else to add on Everdell before we wrap up on this one?
No.
Okay. Sweet. So that is Corinn's first pick. That is Everdell, particularly with Spirecrest. This brings me to my first question for you. And as you can see behind me, I have a little piece of paper there, not piece of paper, my whiteboard that says, in particular, I'm going to need to check. And this is going to lead to my question that I want to put out to the audience. And if you're watching live, please let me know your answer to the question in the comments. Or if you're watching afterwards, please let me know in the comments section. But the question that I have for everybody is, what gaming moment made you dig back into the rulebook? And this is interesting to me because I am always learning new games, and I feel like I have a pretty good handle on most games that I teach. My goal is to make sure that I understand everything before I start playing a game. But this time I was totally caught off guard because of the situation that I was put into. And that was when I was playing Brass Birmingham. So Brass is one of my favorite games. I've got a group here that really likes Brass. One of my friends, Jenna, she loves Brass. It's one of her most played games, I would say. And she has beaten me a lot of times in Brass. She's very good competition. I was teaching it not teaching it, but replaying it with one of my other friends, Ashley. We're all playing together. And at this time, Jenna was very distracted. If you're unfamiliar with Brass, it's a game of route connections. You're going to be creating these networks by creating railways and canals, and you're going to be connecting all of these production buildings. And the idea is that the production buildings are going to flip if you either sell with them or if you remove all of the goods on them. And the goods that are created can be used by anybody. For example, there's some iron here on this ironworks, and any player can use that to take an action and eventually flip their tiles. So if there's a lot of stuff on the board, you're basically eating it up because you want to build things that use these resources. Iron is really good early, particularly because you don't need to be connected to use it, but it also lets you start upgrading yourself. However, what had happened in our game was Jenna had done some plays where she just was building coal mines. However, when she built these coal mines, everybody else had pretty much already put coal mines on the board. So she was really putting out this demand that no one really wanted. And they sat there. They sat there, did not produce anything for her, and she ended up taking a lot of loans. I really like the loan system in this game. You simply just go down 3 on this income track on the side, and then you get $30. It's perfect. I love how simple it is, and it just takes an action. It's always good to do this because it allows you to push your plays further, lets you spend the resources on the things you've already created, and lets you push your game state forward. It's awesome. And it's very easy to incur the loss from that penalty particularly early, because the distance that you'll need to recover by gaining that income is a lot smaller. But that leads us to the second portion. Was Jenna kept taking loans, and she was a little bit distracted in the game, just catching up with people, as well as her kids were in the background and talking. And she had made a critical mistake where she needed to have taken a loan on her turn, and she didn't. She had taken a different action instead and totally blindsided her, and she had to pay back a loan with money she didn't have. And this made me dig into the rulebook. I didn't even know what the rules were for if somebody couldn't pay back their loan or were unable to, because it had never happened. And the cause of this was that she had created way too much coal. No one was using her coal, so nothing was flipping, and she was not able to generate any money to pay back this loan. So what had happened was, in Brass, whenever you need to pay back a loan and you can't, you have to basically get rid of the tiles that you have on the board, and you get money equal to half the cost of the tile, or something terrible like that. It's pretty awful, because not only had she put the money into these things, but they didn't even flip, so she didn't even get the income bonus for removing those tiles. It really set her back. And the first round, she ended the round with, I think, like 8 points just from her canal scoring. And then lastly, in the second era, though, because the second era uses coal for most of the road building, we did end up eating some of the coal that was on her stuff, and she actually did get back into the game later and had about 60 points at the end. So definitely not first place, but 60 points from not literally having to pass for 3 actions in a row. It was a roller coaster. So I was very surprised how she was even able to get in this situation. And it just was really funny to me, because she is not a bad player at this game. I think that she really did have her head somewhere else, and it just, one mistake will do something like this. But I think it was not only one mistake, but successive mistakes, not reading the layout. And it was really unfortunate. So that was a moment that I had that made me dig back into the rulebook. What do you think, Corinn? What was a moment that you've had recently where you had to go and figure out the rules to something?
So I will say, not a particular moment, but several moments. My husband is a very methodical and a very good player, and he knows how to work the system. And so he's had several times in, like, for instance, Everdell, or we'll say Everdell, I guess, in this instance. He was trying to play the ruins, but he was trying to, like, get rid of the ruin to activate the ruin's ability of, like, getting rid of a construction and then being able to, like, play another construction. We're like, I don't think that's what you can do. But we had to go back into the rule book to double check with it, to be like, is that gaming the system, or is that actually, like, an accurate move that he could do? And I honestly am trying to remember if he was able to do that. I think he was.
Is it a common construction? I think you can, because it's
common construction. So we were like, okay, that's fine, because he is all about, if we're playing a deck builder, getting rid of those cards. If we're doing a tableau builder, getting rid of the things that don't need to in order to do that. So there are many times when we play games together where I'm like, let me look at the rule book, make sure you're not cheating.
And I think games like that, with just, like, the rules are very simple, but there's so much text on the cards, you're going to get into a lot of moments like that. Ooh, let me check the gloss around that. Holler Tau is one that I play a lot, that sometimes there'll be a specific effect, and I'm like, I don't actually know what that means, and I'll have to go in for that. So that's a good example. We have Ashley here in the comments here. This is actually the Ashley that I played Brass with. Hey, Ashley. Thanks for joining us on the stream. Truth in advertising. She was distracted, and you were out to prove there's lots of ways to play and win the game. This is true. So I wanted to, because I had played Brass with Ashley before, and Ashley thought, after her first play, she thought there were maybe some rote moves that you could take in this game. And my goal was to prove that there are other strategies that you can use to win. And so I was going to try to basically essentially become this market of resources. And my goal was to try to do a lot of flipping without doing a lot of selling. So maximizing my placement actions and my roads without doing a lot of the selling action, which is, I thought it would be cool to try this, especially with the player count we were at. However, because I had started building this, everybody else started building this. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work, because everybody's doing the same thing. So I was like, guess I got to adapt. So it was cool to still be able to do well, but also adapt my strategy. And I think that's one of the strengths of Brass, is you're able to adapt. So thank you again, Ashley, for joining us. That was a lot of fun. Awesome to have you here.
Yay.
Cool. So that was Brass. Any other thoughts or comments on this before we move to the next one?
I definitely want to play Brass. I've heard so many good things about it, and that's definitely one to, like, add to the list.
It is so good. It is a excellent system with really satisfying card play, and the hand
Mm,
management is brilliant. And I love the interaction. The interaction is
mm,
top notch. The fact that you're consistently looking at what's available, and if
mm.
somebody does something, it's going to change your opinion, but not necessarily your strategy on what's going to on
Gotcha.
what's actually your end game goal is. I love it. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Never a dull moment.
Definitely not. Brass is
Ah,
amazing. So that brings us to our next one. Corinne, what do you got for me? What's our next game we're talking about?
a very simple game and a very fun, fast-paced, just a faster game. Biblios. This one is super fun to play either like multiple rounds of, because you go through it pretty quickly, and it's also double-sided. It's one of those games where you usually use a dry erase marker to fill in your points as well as roll a bunch of dice. Um, are we talking about two different?
Are you playing this game? Or are you talking about the
Yeah,
dice game?
the dice game.
Okay. Biblios dice. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
different game. Different game.
Because
Quill
I
and
was looking.
Parchment or dice? Which one are you playing? Biblios dice? Scripts inscribed the dice game?
Is it
There are
script?
so many versions of Biblios. Which one are we talking about? Biblios, Quill, and Parchment?
Maybe it's Quill. I think it's Quill and Parchment.
Okay.
Because I was
Got you.
looking it up earlier too, and I was like, I am not finding this game. And I was like, oh, maybe this is just like a different sleeve. You know what I'm saying?
Is it this cover?
Come on. Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Oh man, so it's different.
It is a different game than the one that we were talking about earlier.
Hello! But this one is like super, it's a super quick game. Like I said, you roll the dice. You have two phases basically. The first phase is rolling different dice. You are rolling pointage with your white and black and white dice, as well as you are rolling certain symbols that you are tallying up on your board. And you want to be you're trying to get the most of each symbol so that you get higher pointage, as well as getting rid of penalties, I think, for not filling them in, as well as you are trying to accumulate as many points in the first phase so that you can bet and I think it's bet or
Bid.
wager
Mhm.
for the second phase. Because in the second phase, once you have accumulated your points, I think it's 4 rounds of rolling your dice to
Mhm.
accumulate points. You are wagering then of how you want to go first on the second group board. That will allow you to roll certain dice as well as give you certain perks about where you're going on the map, give you extra points for certain things, help you to go up on the piety chart, and all of that. Um, and again, it's double sided. So there's different penalties as well as different ways of accumulating points. Yeah. So this one's a really quick one. Dang it. I'm so sad that this is not the same game that we were talking about earlier.
It is the same designer. It's the same theme. They
But
have
it's
taken the
different.
spirit of the original game and they've turned it into a roll and write. But still a good game.
Gotcha.
I like this game.
Yeah. So it's really quick to pick up. Again, you can play several rounds of it, or in our case, we played, I think, maybe just one round and then we stopped and watched anime.
Excellent. So
Yeah.
in this one, what did you like the most about this game? What
Ooh.
mechanisms stood out, or what moment in your gaming experience?
Hmm. I think just like the two phases of you're accumulating points and then you're wagering. And I
Mhm.
really like that ability to, um, well, you are kind of determining your score because the more you wager, the less you'll have at the end for that
Mhm.
specific box to fill in. But that also, the more you wager, will help you determine to choose like which options that you have on the main like shared board of benefits that you want.
Mhm.
So, and I love roll and writes, like, I just like writing in general, so it's very satisfying to me to, like, fill in all the stuff. So, there's definitely an aspect of, like, tactileness.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things about this game is that second half. I think the second half is done
Yeah.
really well. I like the fact that you're not just auctioning the dice, but you're also auctioning a special ability. And I think that's really smart. They've made it so that there's always going to be a change in the scoring criteria. If you take that first row, you can modify one of the scoring conditions, and I think that's awesome. But there's also additional bonus that you can get based on the dice that you're grabbing. So you may pick a set of dice for the bonus or for the dice themselves, and I love that additional choice and tension. I think that's a really high in this game, is being able to make that correct bid and then getting those specific dice you want. It feels so good when that happens. So I think there's some really cool additions here from the original Biblios. I do think it's a little bit more cluttered. I don't think it's as streamlined as the original, but because it's taken this cool new approach, I think it does a really good job of it.
So the original was more of was it a deck building or tableau building? Or
the original game is very similar, but it is a card game. So in the first half, just like in this game, you're going to be accumulating cards in your hand, and then in the second half, you're going to use those cards in order to auction for different more cards, essentially. It does this through a push your luck drafting mechanism that is quite brilliant, where they've replaced it with the dice rolling in the second version, which I think is still fun. It still retains that feeling, but it's got the dice feeling if you're going for that more than the cards. I do like the push your luck version, though, in that card game version. I do think that the dice modulation system is a little bit more interesting, particularly because of the control that you have with what actually goes in the auction. And this one, the auctioned dice are going to be random every time, but there's a lot of player choice that is given to what actually gets auctioned, because you as the players get to determine what goes in the auction pile, and I think that's brilliant. So there's some good stuff here, though. I really do like this game. I think it's quite fun. Did you play with any of the Kickstarter cards? There's like a little stack of auction cards. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay. So
but it goes with this game?
Yes, it does. There's these little cards right here. So I think this is a really smart expansion. The way it works is during every round, you're going to flip one of these cards, and you'll have an open auction at the end of every round, where the winner is going to erase their value, whatever they spend on it, but get that die immediately. This is really neat because it's going to give you another thing to spend your money on, but also it is going to disrupt the flow, because now you have this additional bonus that you can claim, which can get you to those higher highs because you're trying to climb up those cards. I think it's really well done, and it's really simple. It's also predictable because the icons do not appear more than once, so you can anticipate what is going to come on. I think it's a very solid expansion, and I think it's super cheap. It's like $2 or something like that.
That's awesome.
I recommend it. It's a good promo. Good Kickstarter promo.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that we figured out which game this was. Just not the one that we were thinking it was.
That's okay. This is a great game. I really do like Biblios. This is Biblios, Quill, and Parchment. Anything else to add before we move on to the next one, Corinn?
I was looking down because I did remember a couple more games that I have been playing. So that will be our end list.
Awesome. Sweet. Yeah, so stick on by. We'll cover all of the different games that we've been playing at the end of the stream. We do have a comment from Jonathan Kokoski here. I would love to play brass at some point as well. Heard so many good things. My group will be ready at some point. I think, Jonathan, you got to just rip the Band-Aid off. Play it with your group. It is honestly, if one person knows the rules, you're going to be just fine. The gameplay itself is very simple. It's a simple action system where you're discarding cards to place things. As long as one person can help out with just understanding what networks are and connections. So if you want to be that person, I understand the burden of that. It kind of sucks sometimes, but it's also really helpful because you can facilitate a good gaming experience. So Jonathan, I say pull the trigger, have an awesome time with it. I think you will love brass, particularly with the other comments on our other videos. I think that it's going to be right up your alley. So enjoy that one, Jonathan. And then, it looks like Ashley has a question for Jonathan. So if you're still in the stream here, Jonathan, take a look at that. So that being said, we'll move on to my next game. And this is going to be, again, that I'm still loving. I still think is one of the best to come out this year, but it's with a new experience with it. And that is Ascension Tactics, the deck building miniatures game. So Ascension Tactics is a simple deck builder. You're going to be constructing a deck of cards, and these cards are going to allow you to move champions on a board as well as buy new cards for your deck. It takes the very simple strategy of 2 different currencies, but it adds this new board element, but in a fighting style way, as opposed to something like Clank, where it's more of adventure based. You have a scenario where you're going to be trying to defeat each other. It reminds me a lot of like a MOBA style video game where you're constantly respawning your heroes and champions, equipping them with gear. And I think that it is brilliant. I think that this system works so well, and I am so happy that they did so well that they're going to be bringing out a season 2. So that new Kickstarter should be out fairly soon. If I remember correctly, it will be on Kickstarter. But more champions, more cards. Yes, give it all to me. I think this game system is amazing. But what I want to talk about in particular is about teaching this game for the first time in a co-op capacity. So this was my first time I'd ever played it co-op. I'd only ever played it in competitive, and I had only ever played it in the solo capacity, both which I think are incredible. And I do think that the cooperative mode is also pretty dang amazing. I love the idea of having to coordinate and talk with your partner to make sure that you're getting enough damage to take out the different villains that are going to be on the board. They have a higher health rate, so you do need to do some tag teams to defeat them. But some of the challenges are, some of the cooperative challenges are a bit harder than the other solo challenges. So that being said, this is my question for this game: is what misstep have you made when teaching a new game? So keep this question in mind as I share this small anecdote about my experience with teaching my wife how to play this game. So she had never played. I had told her that it is one of my favorites from this year. She was excited. It's a deck building game. She likes deck building games. The first scenario in the box for Ascension Tactics is really short, and I did not realize how short it was. It was the first scenario. I figured, oh, this should be fine to teach the game. I think this was a misstep. In the original scenario of Ascension Tactics, it is a race to 20 victory points. That's actually decreased from the solo and the competitive version, which is normally 30, which means in that version of the game, it is a very short puzzle. You are trying to puzzle out how to prevent the enemy from gaining those points, and you're also not giving yourself a lot of time to do your actual deck building. You're playing a lot more on the ambush effects, which is still fun. It's very challenging still, but you are not actually giving yourself a lot of time to deck build. And I think that was a misstep because I knew that she really liked building up a deck in deck building, getting those cool combos, playing those cards out. And you can do that in other scenarios. And so some of the scenarios right after that one, the victory points were up to 30, up to 40, up to 50 even. So you would have a lot of time to refine your deck, get your champions out, beef up those champions with these cool cards. And it was a huge mistake, I think, introducing it with that initial scenario. So the speed of this scenario one was just way too fast. It left a really bad impression with not having enough time to deck build. And I think that make sure that you're previewing the scenarios beforehand is really important so that you make sure that first game lands, because that can be all it takes is just one bad experience to sour somebody from a whole game. It takes them a long time to want to play something they didn't really have a fun time with because there are so many games. So I think that this is just another reminder that when you do introduce a game, do that pre-work, make sure that you're understanding what you are going to be teaching, especially with something like this where it is scenario based, where some scenarios could fall pretty flat. I do think the game is still excellent. I did have a fun time still, and hopefully Ariana is going to be up for playing some more Ascension Tactics because I do really like this game. But hey, if she doesn't, that's okay because it's still got an excellent solo mode, and the competitive mode is also awesome as well.
Oh.
So, Corinn, what missteps have you made when teaching? Anything come up in particular?
I'm really trying to think. So a lot of the times, I think it was Tapestry when we were playing it. We were enjoying it so much, but we would always miss like one or two simple rules, and then be like, "Wait, how did we get here? Or how did we get these points, or didn't get these points, or didn't add on to like our pointage?" And so a lot of the times we'd either be underselling ourselves or going over like what we deserved in those kind of instances. And I can also go kind of sidestepping still in the game, but I just recently started DMing for the first time in Dungeons and Dragons. And if it's funny because in this, when you're teaching a board game, the rules are very, very important and like really help with the game. But in Dungeons and Dragons, I was so rigid with the rules that the story could have been better. And so I just think that's interesting how like that kind of taught me to be like a little bit loosey goosey in D&D, but like in board games, it's a little bit more like, oh, like you should. But again, then again, I'm thinking about like house rules. So like in viticulture, I don't know if this is actually a rule or just a house rule with our viticulture, but when you get a new visitor, is that what it's called? We get 2 cards and then you choose between the 2 cards. I don't know.
I think that is a house rule.
Okay. So it is. Okay. Yeah. So stuff like that, which first time I played viticulture, I kept forgetting to get 2 cards. And so I'm just like, oh, I'm stuck with this one. And then my sister would be like, you did get 2, right? I was like, no. So I was definitely stuck with opportunities that I could have had. It just choices
Gotcha.
for rules in that sense. This is a
All
very
right, and
roundabout way of answering that question.
so we'll open up that question once again
Yes.
to the audience. What missteps have you made when teaching new games to people? What pitfalls should people avoid? And give us maybe a specific example from a game. Really curious to hear what you think. And we do have a quick question from Ashley here. She does say, are you aware of a game system where the strength of one player provides a different exchange rate compared to other players? So let's see, a game where if you're doing really well, maybe something's more expensive, or maybe you're taxed. I actually do know a game like this. One that stands out to me in particular is called Belfort. If you have heard of this, Ashley, this is a game of area control where as you play the game, the more points that you have, the more taxes you have to pay. And so getting up really high into the higher victory points areas is actually going to decrease the amount of money that you're producing or that you have to hold back to actually pay, or you'll receive some negative points or negative bonuses. So I don't remember exactly all the rules of this game, but it is a very simple, straightforward area control game with a lot of worker placement as well. You get these different workers that are going to be moving around, but I think this has that theme, and not the theme, but that mechanism you're looking for, that I can think of off the top of my head. So Belfort there is that very neat little game, fantasy theme, and as I said before, it's got some area control with some cool tile placement, I believe. Not tile placement, but controlling these buildings here. And each of the buildings, you can see they're separated into these sectors. So it's going to give you different cubes in the different areas. So that does have that system where the further you go up, the more of a penalty you get. Age of Steam actually does this as well. Further up you are, the more that you have to pay in, I don't remember what it's called, but you have to basically lose income the further ahead you are. So you're trying to time your points perfectly, especially during the early rounds, to make sure that you're actually going to be getting enough money to make it worth going up on that income track.
Well, that just makes me think too of like Everdell a little bit, where like the further you are, the more workers you have, but also like the ability to do certain things is obstructed, or you obstruct other people from doing it because you have all your workers out there.
So I don't think this. I don't think either of our examples fall under this specific example, though. Seeing if it's a different exchange rate. Now you're making me think, Ashley. Tinner's Trail is similar, but that's for everybody. The further that the game goes on, you're paying money for victory points. That's interesting. I'm not sure. I'd have to think about this more. If anybody can think of anything, let us know down in the comments. And Jonathan here is also thinking Age of Steam as well. So good to hear that we're on the same mindset here with our examples. But if anybody has any examples of that for Ashley, please let us know. Sweet. So that's what I wanted to talk about in particular with Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. Still love it. Still think it's amazing, but a misstep in the teaching. Make sure you go through that scenario book and know who you're teaching to. If you want somebody that's looking for a cool cooperative puzzle that's a little bit shorter, do that first scenario. Otherwise, go to one of the later scenarios that has a bit more time to actually build that engine and actually do the deck building. Cool. Corinn, what is your last game? What are we talking about next?
We are talking about an oldie but a goodie, in my opinion, which is Yahtzee. So Yahtzee is a game that I have been asking my husband for the past couple of years, because it's not his favorite. It's it's the luck of the roll. It's a very simple game. It's not like too super strategic. You make choices about where your scoring is and how you hope that the rolls turn out. But it's in that sense, a very simple game. And he is definitely more of a deck building, tableau building, lots of strategy kind of game. But I am actually a fan of Yahtzee. I enjoy it. And I have been using it as for times where if I want to do a solo game that isn't too thinky and just want to enjoy something tactile with my hands, hoping that I can get a Yahtzee myself. Like I honestly will just play by myself and roll the dice.
Totally get it.
Yeah. And it's just enough of an entertainment, like to yourself, and still again the hope of the luck of the dice that it's entertaining.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So there's like a million versions of Yahtzee. What version of Yahtzee do you play? Do you play this electronic version of Yahtzee? No. Do you play Battle Yahtzee or Yahtzee Original? Do you play Yahtzee, the Great Casino Caper? Do you play Yahtzee with the dice cup still on a roll? Do you play Yahtzee? I think this is just Yahtzee.
With just like kind of Japanese inspired writing.
Yeah, I guess.
So funny enough, when I was younger, we had, of course, Disney themed Yahtzee.
Of
because
course.
we
Of
are a
course.
Disney fan. And it was all of the, instead of numbers, so it was kind of Yahtzee. It was very child friendly Yahtzee, where you just want to match as many faces of Disney characters. So if you get 5 Mickeys, it's a Yahtzee, but you're really just kind of keeping score with how many faces you get, basically. And I think there were like 5 faces. So I guess it had to be 6 because it's a 6-sided die.
But Yahtzee cup of noodles, Yahtzee.
I know it's just like Monopoly. Like everybody and their mother who has a franchise basically has a version of Yahtzee or Monopoly. Like there is,
Oh yeah.
or Clue, which again is fine. And there's a reason, like the fact that these games have so many versions of the same thing. Like that's the one, the Hasbro English edition. Go back up.
Boom.
That one.
We found it.
2014. That's the one I
Oh,
have.
good year. Good year.
Even though I got it like last year, but it's fine. Yeah. But
Excellent.
yeah, all of these games, they're classics. They're classics for a reason. And to have them branded a little bit differently with faces of your favorite characters, or just have them on your score sheet, sure, it's great. Is it worth the money? But it's just whatever floats your boat of what classic game you want to own. But I went for the classic, not really messed with Yahtzee.
Gotcha.
Just
Have you played any of like the super unique Yahtzees? One thing that comes into my head is, I think it was called like Dragon Yahtzee or something like that. It's essentially just Yahtzee, but with special powers, special abilities, and like a dragon that you were fighting and other stuff like this.
No.
There's a lot of things that take the Yahtzee idea and add it to something else. So there's also evolutions of Yahtzee that we've seen. One really classic example is King of Tokyo. It's a very simple Yahtzee dice rolling mechanism. You're going to be blasting it around. Have you played any other Yahtzee style games that you've been enjoying?
I mean, I guess Kubitos is kind of like that too, where like it's not really Yahtzee though, where it's like the same. I mean, you want like, if you're really honing in on like one power, for the face die of Kubitos, it's kind of that. No, King of Tokyo is a great one. We have that one.
I'm going to throw it out here. I think the Reckoners is still my favorite Yahtzee style game.
Yes,
I think
that's right.
cooperative nature is just so good. And the fact everyone's rolling at the same time, that's the biggest detractor for these games that implement the Yahtzee style with me, is the downtime really does kill it for me. I think Yahtzee is a game that I'd like to play solo or at 2 if I do play it. But I think I would pick other games before it, but not a terrible game.
Totally valid. What did you score it? I didn't even look.
I scored a 4. So I rated about the same as I rate Can't Stop and other games in that similar vein. Roll dice, assess the situation, roll dice, push your luck as much as possible. So very similar score. Yeah, not the worst game ever.
But it's not.
Yeah. I think it has been iterated enough though, where I do think I find things in that similar vein that I enjoy a bit more.
Yeah. Or more entertaining or better, like you were saying, like adding powers and stuff, or like King of Tokyo, where they're like, hey, let's take it and add a little bit of flair, a little bit more.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Yahtzee?
I mean, rolling dice is very fun, but yes, there are much more fun games to play. But sometimes, you just want to do something by yourself, and that is okay.
I get it.
Okay.
I totally understand having a comfort dice rolling game.
And the nostalgia.
I get it. I totally get it. My go-to is That's Pretty Clever. I think that is my favorite. Sit down, play for 10 minutes, just roll dice and feel comfortable. It gives me that little dopamine rush with all the different bonuses that you're getting. Are you familiar with these games?
I have not. I think you have, or maybe I've just seen it on Board Game Geek. But yeah, I definitely have seen it. I have not been able to play it.
I would strongly recommend it. If you like that satisfying feeling of just sitting down with a piece of paper and rolling dice and trying to get good numbers, this is peak that. This is one of my most played games ever.
Write this down.
The sheet of paper that I have for this has 2 left in it, I believe. For the first one, I think there's like 10 left for the second one, and I think there's at least 20 left in the third one. But the rate at which they're releasing these is going to be probably 1 a year, which I'm ecstatic for. There's going to be new boards for it. I love this. This game is so good. I want to play this game, and I do play this game all the time.
Yeah,
This is one
I
that
can see you've rated it much higher.
it is so good.
Yeah.
A lot of cool push your luck choices, and you're constantly getting something.
Mm.
This is one that I will play solo, and I will play up to 3 players. I think 4
Okay.
players does have that downtime, but you're getting something
Okay.
on other people's turns a lot of the time, and that's pretty great. So I do like that you are engaged on other people's turns.
I would say if for like rolling games that you get on other people's turns, I was thinking of Machi Koro.
Oh yeah, that's a great
That's a
idea
good
too.
one. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's a good
Even
one too.
Catan has that same
Mhm,
idea of
mhm.
rolling. Space base, great, great.
Yep.
And then Ashley has a good suggestion here. Dice Throne is Yahtzee for the new generation. It's Yahtzee, but you're
Oh,
battling each other, and they just released the newest Marvel version.
I'm gonna
So,
write this down
so if you do
too.
like that Yahtzee mechanism, that is very much Dice Throne to a T.
Nice.
Mhm.
Great suggestion. Thank you, Ashley.
Excellent. Anything else to add on Yahtzee before we close this one off?
No, I think I said my piece.
Okay. Okay. And this brings us to the last game that we'll go in like an in-depth discussion on. And this is going to be a game that was recommended to me from my friend Dan over at Chairman of the Board. So Dan and I do a lot of crossover collaborations, particularly corporate cardboard. We've been on a lot of top 10 lists together. So please go check out Dan's channel over at Chairman of the Board. He recently just hit a milestone at his subscriber count. So go check him out. He's doing awesome. He's got this great new system that he's implementing for his rating systems. But with that being said, Savannah Park here is a game that I was really interested in because he said that it was a game that is so easy to teach, so easy to play, and anybody could play it. And it offered something interesting. And initially, I taught myself the game as I do most games with the solo mode. And the solo mode here is, let's just quickly go over what the game is. It is a tile placement game where you're going to have a set of tiles on a board here. And these tiles are all going to start the game with the yellow side face up. And when it's your turn, you'll pick any tile that's yellow on your board, place the meerkat there, pull the tile off, and then flip the tile to the other side, the colored side here, in this case, red. And then you'll place it into an empty spot on your board. And that's the turn. You're going to do that over and over and over again until you've eventually flipped every single tile. So by the end of the game, your whole board is going to be this different color, red in this case. So once that happens, then you score. You're scoring a very King Domino style where you're going to be scoring groups of animals. So for example, let's look at those elephants down there. If this was going to score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elephants times the number of watering holes in those areas. So that'd be 5 times 2, it'd be 10 points for your elephants there. So you're trying to, you can get a maximum, I believe it's 33 points for each of the animals.
Wow.
You're trying to get a lot of points by putting them here. But the greatest thing about this game is the way that the tiles are going to be chosen, and that's because it's all player driven. Now, my question for this one in particular has to do in particular with the solo mode, because when I taught myself this game, I taught it by myself by learning the solo mode. And it is a very easy game. I probably could have taught it with other people and been fine. But my question to you is, what games lose something too important when shifting to a solo mode? What is the straw that breaks the camel's back when it goes from the multiplayer to the solo mode? For me, there's a lot of games that do this, but Savannah Park, I think, is a prime example of a solo mode of a game that is not, it's nowhere as good as the multiplayer version. And the reason this is when you play the solo mode of Savannah Park, it is always your turn. On your turn, you are picking the tile, you are moving it somewhere, and you do this until everything's flipped. And that's it. So you can really take a long time to think about the perfect moves. You can plan everything out from turn 1. And I honestly don't think it's that exciting or that fun because the puzzle is a bit simple. And it's honestly not that interesting when it comes to being able to map it all out from turn 1. But this completely changes when you go to the multiplayer game because you are only picking every so often. You don't get to always pick it. And the greatest part about this is your board looks completely different than every other player's boards because you randomly decide where those tiles are at the beginning. And this is so amazing because you're going to start picking tiles. Somebody decides to flip the single elephant, and then somebody else says the double elephant. And all of a sudden, people are starting to move the elephants, and you don't have a place to put an elephant. So when it gets to your turn, you have to think to yourself, oh, am I going to move this tile just so I can move it to anticipate the elephant? Or do I start working on this other scoring here, or do I move this here? But you can only control so much. And I love this. I love the idea of this pressure of these choices that are, you're trying to anticipate what's going on with these other players, but also setting up your own scoring potential combos. And it is a game where you could really look at your own board the entire time and still have the crazy experience of just thinking to yourself, why have you done this to me? And anticipating and feeling this pressure from all the other players. And that is completely lost in the solo mode of this game. I think this game is a solid 7 right now. I'm really enjoying it. I haven't played any of the expansion content that comes with the game, which is awesome. There's so much. There's a bunch of little expansion modules that you can play with, which is super exciting. There's even one where like lions go on the loose. So excited to try that. But 7 straight out the gate, and I could see it going up with more plays. But without the multiplayer version, if it was just solo, I don't think I'd ever play this game. I think it maybe is a 3 or 4. It is passable. It is a puzzle that is missing something completely. But the multiplayer of this game is phenomenal. I do think it's very, very good. So strange. And that once again brings to the question is what games loses something so important when you do end up switching to a solo mode? Corinn, do you have a lot of experience with solo gaming?
I don't. I was just thinking, I was like, so most of the games that I own that do have a solo mode are like Stonemaier games that have like the Automa, which I feel like still you're solo, but you're facing the board game basically. So they're adding like a second player for you. So I feel like that's bad examples because it's not really solo mode. Or I feel like it's not enough to and I could be completely wrong because I don't have experience. It's not as you don't lose as much because they've at least created scenarios for you to be like, hey, here's like what you're kind of going up against the board game instead of just being by yourself. I was thinking like, I don't know if Carcassonne is a 1-player game. I wouldn't think it would be because it's very much the same kind of thing of like, oh, it's you choose a random tile, and granted I guess that would be the addition to it of like, oh, like, I don't know, this is a random tile, I didn't choose it, but I still get to choose like where it goes. But then it would be your turn every time. So I'm not really sure if Carcassonne does it. But I feel like it would be very much the same thing of like, oh, there's, I can just place my player wherever, even though I have to deal with, oh, where's this tile going? But again, you're not competing with anyone. So you would still have the option.
There's a right move. There's a right move, and there's no tension created because it's all your choice. And I think that's very similar to Savannah Park. So I don't know if there's a solo mode of Carcassonne. It's a good question. Jonathan does have a good comment here, and I totally agree with him. He says that Oath, the enjoyment comes from the player interaction. Great multiplayer, felt super fun solo. Totally agree. I tried to learn this one solo, and it is not a good solo game at all. It is a weird systematic thing where you're just kind of anticipating what's going on. And it's just frankly not that exciting. There's not a lot of interesting plays that the Automa can do because the whole premise of this game is there are so many interesting denizen cards that can hit the board that really do change that game experience. So incredible game multiplayer. I love the almost temporary alliances that can occur throughout just the gaming experience, what it brings out of people. And it's totally lost in the solo mode. The solo mode is systematic. It has a process that it goes through, and it's kind of just like you're moving pieces on a board almost. And didn't really like it at all. I think I played it once and I never touched it again. So, but I do have a lot of plays of this. Very good game. Nice. I like this one a lot.
Sweet.
And I think you mentioned earlier that the Automa is not necessarily this. I think it is. I think the Automa can fall into this category. I think that some Automas are done really well. I think that's one of Stonemaier games' strength is their Automas do work. They do replicate the feeling of the game. The Viticulture Automa works great. It blocks the spaces. Excellent. This is exactly what it needs to do. The Wingspan one is going to cycle some of the more important bird cards in the center. Perfect. That's exactly what it should do. Tapestry is going to move stuff. It's going to place things. Red Rising does a simulation of pulling stuff off of the cards. I think that they do a great job with making easy to run Automas that emulate a player. But then there are also solo modes like, for example, Hallertau, where the solo mode is beat your own score. You're trying to do the best you can, but that anticipation and the card comboing and the draw is going to change something up. I think that the most important thing for a good solo mode is some unpredictability. I think that having some random input is going to be important for making it a little bit more challenging and more interesting. In Hallertau in particular, the amount of not resources, but workers that are removed from each space is going to change. So I think that it just depends on the solo game, but I think that some form of randomness and some form of unpredictability is also good. So it's a big difference between. We're going to speak to Spirit Island, which we've both played before. There are two camps in that where some of the people who play Spirit Island really love the solo mode where you know everything. The solo mode where the only random information is from the minor and major power decks, and the the summoning of the invaders. But then
Yeah.
there are people who say that the only way they want to play it is with the event deck, because that's going to
Mm,
randomly put stuff out. It's going to change the game drastically. And I love
yeah.
playing with the event deck. It makes the games a bit more unpredictable, a bit more interesting. So there are those two camps, but people like it different ways. And I think
Yep.
that's something to appreciate, something that people can say, hey, I enjoy it this way, and that's
Mhm.
okay. There are games for that. If you may like Savannah Park, but those are the reasons I don't like it. It has that predictability from the very first turn that you can.
You may like Yahtzee and you may not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So if you are following afterwards, please let us know what games for you lose something too important when they shift to a solo mode. I'd love to hear what you think on this one. And that's it. Those are the games that we wanted to talk about for our episode 20 of games that we've been playing. So really appreciate Corinn coming on here. Before we close up, though, Corinn, what are all of the games that you've been playing? Go ahead and give me your list.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. I went from 5 to 9, I think. Maybe 8. All right. The games that I've been playing are Viticulture, Tapestry, Yahtzee, Wingspan, Biblios, Parchment and Quill, Everdell, Lost Cities, Silver and Gold, and New York Zoo.
Ooh, lovely. Excellent. Okay, and then I have a total of 43 unique titles with Marvel Champions, Rove, So Clover, Skull King, Crokinole, Oathsworn into the Deepwood, Wingspan, Hadrian's Wall, Final Girl, Bullet, Just One, Warp's Edge, Phantom Ink, 25 words or less, Strike, Ink and Gold, Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game, Paperback, Planet Unknown, That's Pretty Clever, Survive, Escape from Atlantis, El Grande, Newton, Airland and Sea, Spies, Lies, and Supplies, Cover Your Assets, Project L, Unmatched, Clever Cubed, Ankh, Project Elite, Brass, Foundations of Rome, Mythic Mischief, Zombicide 2nd Edition, Riverside, Living Forest, Valifrian, Aquatica, Savannah Park, So, You've Been Eaten, Root, Arc Nova, and Everdell. And these do not include any of the games that I played during FrankCon. So that will be coming out on Wednesday. We have our report for FrankCon 2022. This is going to detail all of the games that were played during FrankCon, how the community day went, and our attendance, just all of the awards for FrankCon. So if you are curious about how that went here in Colorado Springs, I'd love it if you joined us for that video on Wednesday. So it's already recorded. I had it recorded last week, but we're able to do some live streams with Corinn today. So I decided to push it back a little bit. So I'm excited, though, for everybody to see it. So thank you so much, Corinn, for being here. Any games that you're excited for? What games are coming up that you're pumped to play?
I'm actually super excited because we just went to the store and bought one. It is called the Night Cage. It is
Okay.
it's a new spooky one that I found on the Barnes and Noble spooky aisle. And it's one of those games where you are going to be flipping tiles one by one because you're in a dark, very dark space. And then you're flipping tiles one by one to kind of find out where you are in the map of the game. So I'm very excited to see how this goes and how this plays. Again, a spooky atmosphere. So I'm excited to see. Yeah, I think you have to collect certain amount of things in order to get out of this cage that you woke up in. So it's very very scary, very exciting. But I'm intrigued to see how the gameplay and everything works out. But yeah, so we just got that today, so I'm very excited. Always exciting to have a brand new game in my hands.
Super exciting. Awesome.
Yeah.
For me, the game that I am excited to play more of is actually Mythic Mischief. I'm having so much fun with this. I have played it. I wanted to talk about it today, but I think that I'm going to wait a little bit to do so because I haven't played the multiplayer. So it came in yesterday and I was able to play a bunch of solos. I played 6 solo games of it because I wanted to basically get rid of some of the kinks, make sure that I knew all the rules down to the T. And the game itself is just really compelling. It has a extremely good solo mode where you are going to be playing as these. It's essentially the theme is Monsters University. You have all of these cute little monster sidekicks, and the artwork is phenomenal. Let me see if I can find a good one here. It doesn't look like the art's can't really see it that well here. Maybe this. But you have a group of monsters that you get to be. You could be the trolls or the witches. They're like the
So
mean girls,
cute.
sisters.
The mean girls.
It's hilarious. That's probably
I love
completely
it.
wrong. What are they called? The plastics. You got the plastics as the
Yes.
witches. The witches. You got the nerds as the wizards. You've got the zombies, which are like the skaters. It is hilarious. The theme is great, but the game itself is really compelling. You have this library that's going to be moving. You're going to be moving people around in, and you have this action cube system where you can get special abilities and move stuff around and manipulate the board. It's actually that scene from Monsters University where the librarian is trying to capture the people, and you're basically trying to push people in the way of the librarian so that they catch you up.
If you
It's
make
very
any
cute.
noise, she gets you.
Exactly. This time, though, they're on a set path, so you know where they're going. The solo mode has the unpredictability, which I really appreciate. There's detention cards that will allow them to move. That also has some predictability as well with the way that the mythics of the opponent are going to move. So I really like that in the solo mode. However, I'm kind of worried that the multiplayer game is not going to be so good because of the potential downtime. There's only one form of randomness in this game, and that is the after lunch card. So the game is set up, you know where the person is going to go, the librarian, but as soon as they reach their third destination, that last piece is going to flip, and then they're going to reveal their new destination. So that is the only information that is random in the game, and that one single flip in the middle of it. So I'm curious to know how much AP this game's going to induce. It is only 2 players, but you can't play up to 4 with like a team version, or you can have 2 games going on simultaneously. I imagine the best way to play is going to be that 1v1. So I'm curious to see if that is the case, but I hope this game isn't super crushing when it comes to downtime, because obviously there's going to be perfect plays. You can get a perfect play where you can perfectly position all the pieces based on your abilities. So I don't know if a game with as much perfect information like this is going to be one that gets played a lot. I think it'll fall in that same line of like Santorini or TAC or any of these other abstracts, where it's going to be hard for people to really get invested in it because there are those perfect plays, and I think it's going to increase the downtime. Solo mode is really good though. The fact that it has that randomness is excellent. So very excited, and you have that time to think with that solo puzzle.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at. I hope that it's really good. The characters are great. The art is awesome. And I hope that the rest of it's really good. So that is Mythic Mischief. I'll get more of it later. That's it. That's everything. Those are the games that we've been playing. Once again, if you have any questions about anything that you saw here, or you'd like to share what games you've been playing, please let us know in the comments of this video. Love to hear it. And if you haven't already, please check out Corinn's channel over at SuperBlondeNerd. She is excellent at what she does. She has a second channel out now. Is that correct? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
It's just called Super Nerd Home, and it's just more vlog / home decor, because the YouTube algorithm, that's my main purpose of that, because I love squishing as much things as I can, like nerdiness, but YouTube algorithm. But yeah, so I'm a big nerd about doing home decor stuff and just showing like what I'm going to do with like my art studio that I'm currently in. Like I have this gallery wall behind me and things like that. And then as well as vlogs, like I dyed my hair today. So there's just things like that. But my main channel, Super Blonde Nerd, I do talk about everything nerdy, from anime to board games to like my newest video about DMing for the very first time. So there's a whole lot. I'm a big nerd and I love a lot of things. So please, if you are interested, you guys can head on over and check that out. But also subscribe to SideGame Co. if you haven't already, because you're watching this live stream. So
Thank you very much, Corinn. But
You're
thank you
welcome.
again so much for being here. I hope that your new channel, Super Nerd Home, turns out to be awesome, and I hope that it goes really well. So excited that you are excited for all your new home renovations. Very cool. I hope that you are happy with your new space, and I hope that you get to play some more awesome games. It sounds like you've played some great ones already. So happy you got to play Spirecrest. I think that expansion is absolutely wonderful. Yeah, you had some really good picks here today. Excellent.
Thanks.
Sweet. Thank you so much. So that is all we're going to talk about today. Those are our games that we've been playing for episode 20. Thank you so much for watching. And once again, SideGame Strong, y'all. Adios.